In this video, I'm going to share with you the top tricks that I use in my code editor every single day that have made me way more productive as a software engineer. Hi, I'm Robin, and I have experience working in startups and lots of fast-paced environments where you have to get a lot done in a short period of time. The tips I'm going to share with you, they'll be in TypeScript as that's what I use day to day in my working life, but they should work with pretty much any programming language out there, and most editors will have support for the features that I'm going to discuss today as well. Okay, so the first trick I'm going to share with you is multi-cursor editing. If you need to make the same change to multiple lines of code or text, you don't actually have to do it one by one. You can do it all at the same time. Suppose we have this array called first names, and we want to add a bunch of common first names into this array. So let's go to chatgpt.com, let's ask it to give us a few common English names, and once it's generated those, we'll copy them over to the other file. Okay, now we've pasted them, but this is not yet a syntactically correct array. We need quotation marks and we need commas. And the best way to do that is to enter column selection mode. So if you press Command-Alt-Shift down, you'll generate lots of cursors. From there, you can just edit this as if you're editing a single word. You can select the word, you can add a double quote, and then jump to the end, type comma, and we're done. Let's do another example. Here are some words in bullet point form that we want to collapse into a sentence. We can obviously go one by one, but that will take forever. So let's use multiple cursors instead. Select the first occurrence of the hyphen, press Command F2 by default in VS Code, and then you can select every single occurrence of the hyphen, press backspace, and you've got your full sentence. The great thing is this also works in reverse. You can select the first space, press Command F2 to select all the spaces, and then press Enter and hyphen a couple of times. And with the multiple cursors, you've got this done in a second or two. Okay, so the second trick I'm going to show you is variable renaming. Now, if you still manually double-click on a variable's name to rename it, and then go and manually apply that action to everywhere else that references that variable, maybe take a look at this instead. Most editors will have support for a language server for the language you're working in, and that lets the editor actually have knowledge of the language underneath so it can understand things like variables and scope and function names. So you can use this to rename functions and variables really easily. Here we have a function that takes a first name and last name argument and also has a variable inside called full name that concatenates the first name and last name. So let's say we want to rename this full name variable just to name. In VS Code, just hit F2, which is the shortcut for rename symbol, and that will let you rename the full name variable in all the places where it's referenced inside that function, and then just hit Enter to complete the rename. This might not seem super mind-blowing at first, but when you realize that this works outside of the context you're working in, across files, that's when it gets really interesting. Here's a second function that calls the first one with the arguments first name and last name. Now let's imagine that we want to rename the argument name itself. So instead of first name, let's just call it given name. So you can see here it's renamed the variable to given name, but it hasn't changed the local scope where it is still called first name. That's because the function argument is an object, and the object key is not the same thing as the variable that it's been extracted as. But we can easily also rename that. Trick number 3 is to download a string manipulation plugin. A common action you need to do when programming is to change the case of a word or a sentence. So you might need to go from uppercase to lowercase. In case of variable names, you might need to go from snake case to camel case or vice versa. If you're doing this manually, I would urge you to check out a string manipulation plugin which can let you do this in one command. Here I'm working with the protobuf format, which is a data serialization language by Google. The protobuf convention is to have snake-cased field names, but out of force of habit, I've written them camel case here. So let's quickly go in and change that. Let's enter multi-cursor mode using the column selection trick from before, select all the fields, and then go Command P and search for snake, which will bring up the string manipulation snake option. Press Enter, and there you go. Everything is now snake case. Another cool thing you can do with a string manipulation plugin is to renumber sequences. In protobuf, each parameter has an integer ID, and once your code is in production, you don't want to renumber these, but when it's a work in progress, it's nice to keep a clean ID sequence. So if we wanted to delete the age parameter here, we now have a gap. Let's enter column selection mode again and create cursors from the third element down, and now hit Command P, type decrement all numbers and hit enter. And that's it. We've restored the sequence. Trick number 4 is for people who love using the keyboard and hate reaching for the mouse. Now it's pretty frustrating trying to jump to a different place in the code in your editor because you have to take your fingers off the keyboard, reach for the mouse, scroll, find the place you want to go to, and then click to go there. Now you can go learn an editor like Vim, but most of us don't want to spend the time learning Vim. What you can do instead is install a quick jump plugin, and what this lets you do is with a single keyboard command, you can actually open up a list of places to go to in the code, and then you can type the letter corresponding to that place in the code to quickly jump there with your cursor. Alright, so for this example, I'm going to use a plugin called Jumpy. So let's go to the extension marketplace and install that onto VS Code. Now you'll also want to configure a keyboard shortcut for the Jumpy word mode. All that means is that you'll be able to jump to any word on the screen, and you can also configure a shortcut for the other two if you want. So the way you use Jumpy is if you have a file open with lots of lines of text, you just trigger the key binding that you just set for Jumpy word mode, and you'll see these 2-letter overlay pop up all over the screen. Now you just have to look at where you want to go and type the corresponding 2 letters that you see in that place. And once you've done that, your cursor will jump straight there. Trick number 5 is not really a trick, but it is something you should be doing if you're coding in 2024, and that is to use an AI native code editor. 2 great examples right now are Cursor and Zed. My choice is Cursor at the moment just because it's a plug and play switch from VS Code. You can just import all of your VS Code settings, and Cursor actually runs VS Code under the hood. All your plugins and configurations still work together with Cursor. As an added bonus, you get these really useful AI features that I'll take you through in a second. Another good option today is Zed. This is a completely new editor built in Rust and optimized for speed, but it doesn't quite have the compatibility of VS Code, and obviously it's not as ubiquitous as VS Code, and therefore Cursor is a bit more easier to switch to if you're just making the transition now. Trick number 6 is AI rewrites. So now that you're using an AI native code editor, let me show you some really useful things that you can ask the AI to do for you, which may even supersede some of the things that I've told you about in the previous tricks. Okay, so let's see what Cursor can do for us with its AI features from a previous example. Once again, we want to collapse this list into a single sentence. Now let's select all, and now go Command K to edit using AI. Type rewrite into sentence, and hit Command Enter to accept. And there it is. Within a second or two, the AI understood what you meant and gave you the result that you need. As before, this also works in reverse. Let's select all, and now let's type turn into bullet points. And there we go. You might notice that we don't have to be very specific at all. Recent LLMs like Claude 3.5 Sonnet or GPT-4o are almost as good as a human at understanding the outcome that you're after. Now let's look at the protobuf example from before. Instead of being a multi-step process with multiple cursors, AI can actually help us get this done even faster. Let's select the person message, type Command K, and ask the AI to remove the age field and renumber. And just like that, it's done. Now let's add it back. Select the message, type Command K, add age years as the third option. When it works well, it's pretty magical. For our final example, let's look at something a little bit more complex. Here we have a function that takes a few parameters, handles a few edge cases, and then composes a message to return. I want to write a unit test for this function. Let's let the AI help us out here as well. Let's go to this file I made earlier, and starting from a blank slate, we can just go Command K and ask Cursor to write a test for us. What's really neat is you can actually reference the file you want to write a test for by typing @ and then choosing the file from the list. You can see here that Cursor's included the file example.ts, as context for the AI. And all we have to do is ask for it to write a test for us covering the edge cases. No need to be too specific. Now we hit Command Enter, and the result's pretty good. We've got a whole test suite for this function. It's handled the 2 edge cases. There's a test for the happy path, and also a test for when we pass the optional age parameter in. If you're eagle-eyed, you might have noticed at the top here that it's used a deprecated method to assert the errors. In this case, we can actually use the AI to rewrite this and not use the deprecated method. And that's it. We've got a test suite for our function. We can add to it, enrich it with our own code if necessary, but this is a great starting point written for us in a few seconds. Those were the top editor tricks that I use every day to save me time. If you found this useful or if you learned something new, please do give me a like and subscribe for more content in the future about being productive as a software engineer.